Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the space where we say, I can sleep. I hope you all are doing well right now as we are reaching the midpoint of yet another month of 2023, and it is almost time for summer. Hopefully, those of you who are in school are doing well on finals, getting ready for finals, and are probably excited for your summer plans. And for everyone else, I hope you guys are having great plans for your summer as well. And hopefully a part of it is continuing to listen to these readings of mine because they are not stopping at all. Of course, if you don't want me to stop and would like for me to continue, you can support me by leaving me comments, likes, sharing my stuff, and following me on my platforms like Spotify at iKenSleep, YouTube at iKenWin, TikTok at iKenWin, and Instagram at officially.iKenWin. Now let us ascend into Heaven Official's blessing. Chapter 14, Admiring the Flower Through Red Clouds, a Heart Full of Affection. Though Hua Cheng's words were filled with contempt, the moment he spoke, the man in question allowed the taunting from all around and dared not to argue back. The attendant who had led Shilian to the long table said, "Gongji, you are very lucky today." Shilian never moved his gaze from the table. "How so?" "Our Qianqiu rarely comes by," the attendant replied. "It is only these past few days that he has been in the mood. So is this not good luck?" Judging by her tone, Shilian could tell that the attendant held this Qianqiu in high regard, as if the mere sight of him was the greatest of fortune. Shilian couldn't help but smile. The screen curtain was made of soft silk, captivating in its red silhouette, a truly enchanting sight. In front of the red curtain, there were a few charming women overlooking the gambling table. Shilian was content to just watch from the background at first, but the moment he heard Hua Cheng's voice, he started trying to push through the crowd, though without drawing any attention to the fact that he was there. Finally, he squeezed through to the table and saw the man in the middle of putting down his bets. The betting man was a living human. Shilian wasn't surprised, as it was known that there were more than just ghosts in Ghost City. There were also a number of cultivators of considerable skill, and once in a while, mortals at the brink of death, or those who wished to die, would stumble in by accident. The gambling man also had a mask on, but both his eyes were visible, bulging and laced with red as if they were bleeding. His lips were pale, as if he hadn't seen the sun in days. Although he was a living human, he resembled a ghost more than any of the ghosts present. Both of his hands were pressing down tightly on a black wooden dice ball on the table, and after holding back for a moment, he shouted with the air of a man who'd stopped caring about anything else. "But how come the other guy was allowed to bet both his legs?" One of the croupiers before the red curtain smiled. "The one before used to be an acclaimed bandit, known wherever he went for his light footwork and ability to take flight. That ability was the essence of his life, so his legs were deemed a worthy bet. You are neither a skilled artisan nor a renowned medic. What worth does your one arm possess?" The man gritted his teeth. "But I bet 10 years of my daughter's life." Shilian was stunned by those words and thought, where on earth is there a father who is willing to bet with the life of his child? Is that even possible? Behind the curtain, Hua Cheng only snorted. "Very well." Shilian couldn't tell if it was his imagination, but he could sense coldness in that response. But then he added mentally, "Sunlung said he always has good luck, and all his fortune sticks came up as the best of luck. If he bets against this man, won't he win for sure and take 10 years of life from that man's daughter?" He was just thinking this when the croupier announced sweetly by the long table. Even is a loss, odd is a win. Once the cup is tipped, there is no turning back. Now, please. As it turned out, Hua Chang wouldn't be involved in the betting after all. That man shook the gambling cup haphazardly, both hands grasping hard, and the hall quieted down. The sounds of the dice rattling could be heard loud and crisp. A long while after, his movement came to a sudden stop. Then, everything was still. It was a long while before the man slowly, very slowly, lifted a corner of the gambling cup and peeked through the gap. Those bloodshot eyes suddenly widened. He flipped open the cup and shouted with mad joy. Odd! 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 I win! I've won! I've won! I've won! This was certainly not the outcome the crowd of humans and ghosts around the long table had wanted to see, and they started booing the man down, slapping the table and shouting their discontent. One of the croupiers smiled and said, "Congratulations. Your business will soon see a turn for the better." The man laughed uproariously and cried, "Wait! I want to bet again." The croupier smiled. "You are welcome to. What do you want this time?" The man pulled a long face and he said, I want everyone competing with me in my trade to drop dead." Hearing this, the crowd started muttering and clicking their tongues. The croupier raised a hand to cover her smile. "If that is what you desire, it is much more difficult to fulfill than your previous wish. Will you not consider something else? Asking for your business to flourish further, for example?" Yet the man replied, his eyes red. "No! That's the only thing I want to bet on. That's what I'm betting for." "Then, if that is your wish, 10 years of your daughter's life may not be enough," the croupier said. "I'll add more if that's not enough. I'll bet 20 years of her life, and the fate of her marriage, too." The ghostly crowd was in an uproar, and they burst out laughing. "This dad's out of his mind. He's selling his daughter." "Wow, just wow." The croupier announced once again, "Even is a loss, odd is a win. Once the cup is tipped, there's no turning back. Now, please." That man once again took up the gambling cup, trembling as he shook it. If he lost, his daughter would lose 20 years of her life and a perfectly good marriage, which was obviously not ideal. But if he won, all his competitors would drop dead? Although Shilian didn't think Hua Chang would ever let such a thing happen, after much hesitation, he stepped a little closer. He was just debating whether he should cast some small trick when suddenly, someone grabbed hold of him. He turned his head to see and found Shi Qingxuan. Shi Qingxuan had returned to his male form and he whispered, "Don't be rash." Shilian whispered back, "Lord Windmaster, why did you transform back?" "It's a long story," Shi Qingxuan sighed. "That group of girlies and aunties dragged me around saying they were going to introduce me to good beauty parlors. I finally escaped, but they caught me again, so I had to change back. They dragged me to a place that smeared so much stuff on my face, pulling, stretching, slapping, smacking. Quick, check my face. How is it? Anything wrong? Do you see anything off?" He pushed his face right up to Shilian for inspection, and Shilian dutifully scrutinized it before replying truthfully, "I think it looks even smoother and fairer than before." Shi Qingxuan brightened immediately. "Really? Oh good, that's wonderful. Is there a mirror? Where's a mirror? I want to see." "Look later," Shilian said. Ghost City is blocking our spiritual communication, so let's not lose each other again. By the way, how did you know I was here, Lord Windmaster? I didn't, Shi Qingxuan replied. I came because Qianqiu and I had already agreed to meet here. When we lost each other earlier, I just came here instead. But when I walked in, it turned out you were here too. You called Qianqiu out? Xilian asked. To meet here. Yeah, Shi Qingxuan replied. Qianqiu is Lang Qianqiu, His Highness Taihua. You know that much at least, right? He's the martial god of the East. Since we're here, it'll be best if he comes too. The Gambler's Den is one of the most bustling, chaotic places in Ghost City. It's a landmark. People and ghosts alike go in and out in large numbers, so it's much less conspicuous for us to mingle. That's why I told him to meet us here. Xilian nodded. When he turned back to the long table, that man still hadn't lifted the cup. His eyes were rolled back and he was muttering, not unlike many of the ghosts there. Xilian sighed. This man. Shi Qingxuan, still feeling his face, said, I know what you want to say, and I agree. But Ghost City is Huachang's territory, and the rules here at the den are all followed willingly. You gamble at your own risk. The heavens can do nothing. Let's just observe for now, and we can come up with something if this gets out of hand. Xilian hummed, thinking that there was no way Sanlang would allow this to get out of hand. It would truly be best just to observe. With that thought, he settled down. As for the gambling man, he finally seemed to gather enough courage and lifted the cup just a sliver. The outcome was about to be revealed. Just then, another person burst in and slammed the cup back down with a strike that crushed it to pieces. This strike not only crushed the gambling cup, but also the hand that was on top of it. The entire table splintered with a deep crack. The masked man cradled his crushed hand and rolled all over the floor screaming. The crowd of ghosts also started shouting, some cheering and some crying out in shock. The person who had smashed their way in yelled, You! What a vicious heart! A wish for wealth and fortune, fine. But to wish for others' sudden death? If you want to bet, have the guts to bet your own life, not the life and marriage of your daughter. You're not fit to be a man, not fit to be a father. The young man had straight, strong brows and stars for eyes, bursting with heroic aura. Although he was dressed in simple black attire, nothing extravagant, his air of nobility could not be concealed. It was none other than the Crown Prince of Yang'an, Lang Qianqiu. From their spot in the crowd, Xilian and Shi Qingxuan both covered their faces at the same time. Xilian groaned. Lord Windmaster, did you not tell him to be a little more cautious when he's here, and to keep it low-key? Shi Qingxuan whined back. I told him, but he's always like this. What can I do? Had I known earlier, I would have planned for us to come here together. Xilian sympathized. I get it. I understand. Just then, Huachang chuckled lightly from behind the curtains. Xilian's heart skipped a beat. The youth had often laughed when he was with Xilian, so now Xilian could judge fairly well when the laughter was genuine versus when it was mocking, or when it was laced with killing intent. His voice was languid. You must have guts of steel to start trouble in my territory. Lang Qianqiu turned to face the direction of the voice with fire in his eyes. Are you the owner of this gambler's den? The crowd jeered from all around. Ignorant child! Do you know who you're talking to? That's our Qianqiu. Someone sneered. Not only does he own this gambler's den, the entire Ghost City is his. Lang Qianqiu barely showed any reaction when hearing this, but Shi Qingxuan was completely taken aback. Dear Lord, Is that who I think it is behind the curtains? Crimson Rain Sought Flower? Xilian answered. Yes, it's him. Shi Qingxuan asked again. Are you sure? Xilian replied. I'm certain. Shi Qingxuan panicked. Crap, what do we do about Qianqiu now? Xilian said after a few moments. Let's just hope he doesn't expose his identity. Yet the more Lang Qianqiu looked around, the angrier he became. This hellish place reeks of smoke and corruption, and it's filled to the brim with demonic chaos. What scum is gathered here committing what kind of deeds? Running a place like this? None of you have a single trace of humanity. The crowd booed in unison. We ain't human anyway. What do we need humanity for? What a useless concept. Whoever wants it can take it. Who do you think you are, coming all the way here just to insult us? Amused, Huachang said. This den of mine is a carnival of hell to begin with. There's a path for you in heaven, but you refused to take it and instead chose to barge into the despairing depths of hell. So, what shall we do with you? The moment they heard the word heaven, Xilian and Shi Qingxuan instantly knew. Just as they'd suspected, Huachang had already seen through Lang Qianqiu and knew exactly where he came from. Yet Lang Qianqiu completely missed the implication of his words and slammed his hand down on the table once more. He was standing at one end, and with that single strike, he sent the entire table flying toward the red shadow behind the curtain. Those who had been gathered around the table dodged to the sides, but the seated silhouette behind the curtain didn't move. With a wave of his hand, the long table was flung back in the opposite direction, back toward Lang Qianqiu. At the side of the rebounding table, Lang Qianqiu caught it with one hand, but he quickly realized he couldn't handle the overwhelming force bearing down against him, and immediately switched to both hands. As he pushed and pushed, blue veins began to pop on his forehead. The once bustling hall now had people and ghosts fleeing and hiding. Xilian and Shi Qingxuan debated whether they should step in to help. Since they hadn't been exposed yet, they could continue to help out in secret, but if they jumped in openly, they'd risk having their covers blown completely. On the other end, Lang Qianqiu gave a loud shout and finally shoved back the hefty table. Behind the red curtains, Huachang's silhouette was still lounging on the chair. He curled all 5 fingers into a fist, then released them lightly. Instantly, the table exploded into fragments of wood, the splinters shooting toward Lang Qianqiu. The force of this gust flung forth countless splinters as sharp as knives, more fearful than any hidden weapon. If Lang Qianqiu were to keep his powers hidden and remain in his mortal form, there was no way he'd be able to evade the attack. Thus, moments later, his body started to emit a faint light. Xilian and Shi Qingxuan understood right away and panicked. Oh no, he's going to reveal his true form. But this faint sheen of spiritual light vanished as soon as it appeared. Lang Qianqiu had probably remembered that he wasn't supposed to reveal his identity on this trip and caught himself at the last second. He quickly withdrew his power, having barely stopped the flying splinters. However, while Lang Qianqiu had stepped back, Huachang, on the other hand, would not. The crimson figure sitting leisurely behind the red curtain made another hand seal. This time, he pressed his fingers together and lightly flicked up. With this one motion, Lang Qianqiu's body was suddenly lifted off the ground. Sprawled out like a starfish, his body was suspended on the ceiling of the great hall of the gambler's den. Even after being caught, Lang Qianqiu still didn't seem to be able to wrap his head around how he suddenly started floating, and he struggled to break free, his face full of confusion. Xilian felt his head throb. Now that his power's been sealed, even if he wants to return to his divine form, it'll be impossible. Shi Qingxuan agreed. Since Ghost City is Huachang's territory, if he wants to seal his power, he can. Even though Lang Qianqiu had been apprehended before the crowd, there was at least one upside. Namely, his identity was probably still safe for now. If he had continued the brawl and released his powers, it would be hard to explain why Taihua Zhenjun, the martial god of the East, had come to Ghost City to wreak havoc. After all, unless there was something extraordinary afoot, the heavenly and ghost realms hadn't crossed each other's paths in centuries. Seeing that the gambler's den's unexpected guest had been detained, the crowd that had fled returned and gathered in the hall once more. They pointed at the suspended Lang Qianqiu and laughed uproariously. Lang Qianqiu had probably never experienced this kind of humiliation before, and his face flushed red as he wordlessly struggled against the invisible bindings. From time to time, a ghost from below would jump up in an attempt to pat his head. Fortunately, Huachang had hung him fairly high up, far out of reach, sparing him that embarrassment. Huachang chuckled from behind the red curtains. What an interesting catch today. I'll let you all play with it. Whoever is lucky and wins big can take it home to roast. At those words, endless cheers erupted within the hall. Bet on the roll! Let's bet on the roll! The highest roll can take him home to roast! Oh my! This little Gaga looks pretty delicious. Who's the fool now? That'll teach you to cause trouble around here. The four masked bouncers carried in a new long table, and the crowd flocked to the area once again to start the next round of bets. The masked man who was clutching his hand and howling on the ground was long forgotten. The prize this time around was none other than Lang Qianqiu, suspended in midair. Seeing how riled the crowd was, Shi Qingxuan paced back and forth, anxiously flailing his arms. What do we do? Should we go up there and win him back? Or is it better to fight? Xilian asked. Lord Windmaster, how's your luck? Shi Qingxuan replied. It's sometimes good, sometimes bad. There's no certainty with something like luck. Xilian said. There can be. For example, look at me. I've never had any good luck. Shi Qingxuan gaped. Is it that bad? Xilian nodded, ruefully. Whenever I roll, the most I get is snake eyes. Shi Qingxuan knitted his brows. But an idea immediately came to him, and he slapped his thigh. How about this? Since the most you ever get is snake eyes, then you should bet on the lowest number. There can't be anyone who will roll lower than you. After a moment of consideration, Xilian agreed. You have a good point. Let me try. So he found a place near the table and threw out a suggestion. Why not switch the rules up a bit and see who can roll the smallest? The lowest roll wins. How about that? The crowd around the table was rowdy. Some agreed, some disagreed. Xilian decided to take 2 dice and give it a try first. Before he rolled, he chanted mentally. Small, small, small. The dice were tossed, and the 2 leaned in to take a look. 2 sixes! Xilian rubbed his forehead in defeat. It seems that not even a change of rules can change my luck. Shi Qingxuan mirrored him in rubbing his forehead. Maybe it'd be better to just fight outright. Just then, a croupier approached the red curtains and leaned in, as if trying to hear what the figure behind was saying. She nodded, raised her head, and announced. Everyone, may I have your attention, please? Qianqiu has an announcement to make. Hearing that Qianqiu had something to say, the crowd immediately dropped everything and became exceedingly quiet. The croupier continued. Qianqiu said to change up the rules. Chatter broke out in the crowd. Qianqiu is the rule. The rules are whatever Qianqiu says they are. What are we changing them to? The croupier responded. Qianqiu says that he is in a good mood today and wants to play a couple of rounds with everyone. Anyone is free to bet against him. Whoever wins can take home the thing up above. Whether to steam it, boil it, fry it, or pickle it will be completely up to the winner. Learning that they'd be betting against Qianqiu, the ghosts began to have second thoughts. It seemed that Huachang indeed never stepped in to gamble himself. There were a few brave souls tempted to give it a shot, but not a single one of them dared to be first. Above them, Qianqiu continued his struggles with endless determination. He barked. What do you mean, thing? I'm not a thing. You dare use me as a bet? This proclamation that he wasn't a thing was heard by the many female ghosts in the crowd. Giggling, they stared at him with openly luxurious looks, while running the tips of their blood-red tongues across their lips, as if they wanted to swallow him whole. Xilian thought, this child, it's better if you speak less. After a soundless sigh, Xilian stepped forward and said gently, In that case, please let me have a try. Upon hearing his voice, the shadow behind the red curtains paused. Then the figure slowly rose to his feet. The croupier in front of the curtain smiled. Then, will this Gongji please come forth? Within the hall, the crowds of humans and ghosts all parted for this brave warrior. When Xilian reached the end of the path, the croupier presented him with the polished black gambling cup in her hands. Please go ahead, Gongji. To all the previous gamblers, she had always used a casual way of speaking. Despite the ordinary words she uttered, her tone wasn't polite in the slightest. However, to Xilian now, not only has she started using honorifics, the tone she used was also exceedingly polite and respectful. Xilian received the black gambling cup from her with a word of thanks and lightly cleared his throat. Since he had never touched anything of this sort before, he shook the cup randomly for a good while and pretended that he knew anything or two. As he moved his hands, he looked up and glanced at Qianqiu hanging above. Qianqiu stared back at him, wide-eyed and pitiful. But thankfully, he didn't make a sound. His expression made Xilian want to laugh for some reason, but he held it back. After shaking for a long time, he finally stopped. Countless pairs of eyes were intently focused on the cup in his hands, and Xilian felt that somehow, this tiny little gambling cup had grown incomparably heavy. He didn't know if there was a right way to flip it. However, just as he was about to reveal the outcome, the croupier stopped him. Wait! What is it? Xilian asked. The croupier replied, Qianqiu said that your cup shaking posture isn't quite right. Xilian thought to himself, so there really is a correct way of doing this? Could all my bad luck earlier be due to my bad posture? He asked modestly. Then may I ask what the correct posture is? The croupier responded. Qianqiu has invited you to come up, as he is willing to teach you, Gongxi. Upon hearing this, the crowd of ghosts within the den drew in sharp breaths. Xilian heard the ghosts grumble. To think Qianqiu is going to teach him, that's a first. Does that mean he's gonna die? Qianqiu wants to do what? Just who is this? Why teach him? Shaking a cup is shaking a cup. What kind of correct posture is there? Xilian was thinking the same question, but the croupier had already motioned him toward the red curtains. Please. Thus, Xilian arrived in front of the red curtains with the black wooden gambling cup clutched in his hands. The silk curtains swayed gently, almost giving life to the red silhouette. The person behind the curtains was standing directly in front of him, with only half an arm's distance between them. Xilian held his breath as a hand parted the heavy red curtains and landed perfectly under his own, supporting the gambling cup. This was a right hand, slender and pale, and the well-defined fingers had a red string tied around the third digit. Against the pitch-black wooden cup, the white appeared even paler and the red even more vivid. Slowly, Xilian lifted his eyes. A youth, roughly 18 or 19 years of age, stood silently behind the cloud-like red silk curtains. It was Sun Leng. His robe was still the red maple red, his skin still white as snow. It was the same uniquely handsome and dangerously sharp youthful face, but its contours were now slightly more defined. While he could still be called a youth, he could also be called a man. The shyness of boyhood had evolved into a composed calm. The sheer wildness between his brows reflected his pride. The same eye that twinkled like a star was now gazing deeply, unblinkingly at Xilian. However, though it was as bright as a star, it was only one eye, the left eye. The other was hidden behind a black eye patch. The red silk curtains were only open a small slit. In his position, Xilian was the only one who could make out the person behind the curtains, since he was blocking the view from everyone else in the hall. Not that they would dare to sneak a peek anyway. That left eye watched Xilian, and Xilian returned the gaze, subconsciously drawn to it. This time, Huachang looked not only a few years older, but he'd also grown taller. Before, when Xilian looked at him, he could maintain eye contact comfortably. But now he had to strain his neck to look up. After they had both stared for a good, long while, Huachang finally broke the silence. He said in a deep voice, "Would you like to bet high or low?" It was this deep voice that pulled Xilian back to reality. As it made no difference how he bet, he answered, "High." "Fine," Huachang replied. "Then I'll roll first." Xilian's left hand supported the base of the black gambling cup, while his right hand covered the circular lid. Huachang stood in front of him, and with his right hand covering Xilian's left, he guided him to shake lightly before lifting the lid. There were 2 dice at the bottom of the cup, a 6 and a 5. Qianqiu, from where he was hanging above them, had a clear view and saw how easily he rolled such a high number. His eyes widened and he exclaimed in awe, "How did that happen?" Huachang loosened his hand slightly and beckoned to Xilian. "Shake it like this. Now you try." Xilian mirrored his actions and shook the cup twice. But Huachang said, "Not like that." To be continued.